On the morning of what was supposed to be the most beautiful day of her life, Fonda Marshall woke up with a strange heaviness in her chest she couldn't explain. The sun was bright over the Whitfield estate, pouring gold light through the massive glass windows of the bridal suite, where silk dresses hung like dreams waiting to be lived. Everything looked perfect on the surface, too perfect. The kind of perfection that makes your instincts whisper instead of shout. Fonda tried to silence that feeling as she sat in front of the mirror, her makeup half done, her hands slightly trembling while the stylist adjusted the final touches of her hair. In a few hours, she was supposed to marry Garrett Whitfield, the heir to one of the most influential families in the region, a man she had loved or thought she loved for 3 years. But love, she was about to learn, can sometimes be a carefully constructed illusion built on selective truths. Downstairs, the Whitfield estate was already alive with controlled chaos. Planners directing staff, florists adjusting arrangements worth more than most people's monthly salary, and guests arriving in designer suits and gowns that screamed generational wealth. Everyone smiled the same way, carefully, politely, as if even joy had to meet approval standards here. Fonda's parents had arrived earlier that morning. Her father, a quiet, hard-working plumber who had spent his life fixing what others broke, and her mother, a cafeteria worker who always smelled faintly of home-cooked meals and sacrifice. They were nervous, but proud, dressed in the best clothes they owned, standing together like two people who had fought the world just to make sure their daughter stood in a place like this today. Fonda had hugged them tightly before being pulled away by the wedding coordinator, promising she would see them soon at the ceremony. She had no idea that soon would carry a weight she couldn't yet understand. It began subtly, as most humiliations do in places like this. A misplaced glance. A whisper that stops when you turn your head. Then Fonda noticed something strange. During the seating arrangement discussion she wasn't supposed to hear. While passing through the hallway near the grand dining hall, she overheard Garrett's mother, Evelyn Whitfield, speaking in a tone sharp enough to cut glass. "No, they cannot sit at table 1, Evelyn said firmly, as if discussing logistics rather than human beings. "That table is reserved for the Hendersons and the board members." There was a pause, then a softer voice, "Garrett's. Where should they go then?" Fonda stopped walking. Her breath slowed without permission. She stepped closer to the doorway, just enough to see without being seen. Evelyn didn't hesitate. Back section. Near the service area. Table 14. A faint laugh followed, as if it was obvious. "We don't want confusion among guests." The word confusion hung in the air like poison disguised as perfume. Fonda's heart dropped, but what she heard next shattered something deeper. Garrett didn't object. He didn't defend her parents. Instead, there was a brief silence before he said, almost casually, "That's probably for the best. We need to keep the main tables aligned with the right company." Right company. Those words echoed in Fonda's mind long after she quietly stepped away, her heels barely making a sound against the marble floor. She felt like she was walking through a dream that had quietly turned into a nightmare without changing its scenery. The same chandeliers, the same floral arrangements, the same music playing softly in the background. But suddenly, everything felt staged, artificial, cruel in a way that didn't need to shout to be understood. Her parents, meanwhile, were being guided through the reception area with polite but dismissive efficiency. No one looked them in the eye for too long. A young staff member, overly eager to please the Whitfield family, escorted them toward the far end of the hall where the lighting was dimmer and the noise of celebration felt distant, almost like they were being slowly erased from the center of the story. Fonda watched from across the room as her mother hesitated, confused, glancing around at the emptying chairs near the back. Is this correct? Her mother asked gently, holding her purse tightly. The staff member smiled politely, but his eyes avoided hers. Yes, ma'am. Table 14. Her father didn't argue. He never did. He simply adjusted his jacket and nodded, as if accepting a decision he had no power to question. But Fonda saw it. She saw the way his shoulders lowered slightly, not in anger, but in quiet resignation. That small shift carried more weight than any shouted insult ever could. And something inside her began to fracture not loudly, but deeply. Like glass cracking under pressure it had been holding for too long. Later, when she finally confronted Garrett in a quiet corridor near the ballroom entrance, she expected confusion, maybe even apology. Instead, she found calm indifference. "It's just seating, Fonda," he said, loosening his cufflinks. "If discussing whether, don't turn this into something it isn't." Her voice shook. "They're my parents." "And," he replied, as if that explained everything. Then came the sentence that would burn itself into her memory forever. "My mother thinks it's inappropriate for them to sit with our primary guests. We're trying to maintain a certain standard today." Standard. The word echoed again, heavier this time. Fonda stared at him, searching for the man she had trusted. The man who once spoke about love as if it was supposed to mean protection. But all she saw now was alignment with a world that quietly measured human worth like property values. "So you agreed?" she asked softly. Garrett sighed, almost impatient. "I agreed, it makes sense." There was no anger in his voice. That was what made it worse. No cruelty, no hesitation, just certainty. As if this was normal, as if dignity was negotiable. Fonda walked away without another word, her wedding dress suddenly feeling heavier with every step. Behind her, the music swelled, laughter echoed, glasses clinked, but inside her, something had shifted permanently. She found her parents briefly near the back tables. Her mother smiled when she saw her, trying to hide confusion. "Sweetheart? Is everything okay? They said we should sit here." Fonda looked at them looked at them, and for a moment, she couldn't speak. Because how do you explain humiliation that has been politely arranged into table numbers and floral centerpieces? How do you tell to people who gave everything that they have been placed closer to the kitchen than to their own daughter's happiness? She forced a smile, the kind that hurts to wear. "It's just temporary," she lied gently. "Everything's fine." But even as she said it, she knew something irreversible had already begun. The ceremony had not yet started. The vows had not yet been spoken. And still, the wedding was already falling apart in ways no one else could see. And Fonda Marshall, standing in the middle of a room filled with celebration she no longer belonged to, made a silent promise to herself that would change everything that came next. The moment Fonda Marshall stepped away from her parents' table, something inside her stopped trying to pretend. The wedding hall was now fully alive, music swelling, glasses clinking, laughter bouncing off crystal chandeliers, but to her, it all felt like it was happening behind thick glass, distant and distorted, as if she had already crossed into a different version of reality where everything looked the same but meant something entirely different. She stood alone near the edge of the ballroom entrance, watching guests take their seats, watching the Whitfield family glide through the room with practiced elegance, receiving smiles, respect, and attention like it was their natural inheritance. And then she saw Garrett again, standing at the front near the decorated stage, adjusting his cufflinks, calm, composed, untouched by what he had already agreed to. That calmness hurt more than any argument ever could. Because it confirmed something she was no longer willing to deny. This was not a misunderstanding. It was a decision. A deliberate, quiet decision about who mattered and who didn't. and her parents had been placed, without noise or warning, on the side of didn't. The ceremony coordinator signaled that everything was ready. Guests began settling. Phones were switched to silent. The orchestra shifted into a softer tone. It was the moment where everything was supposed to become sacred. Fonda was expected to walk down the aisle any second now, to smile, to perform, to complete the story that had already been written for her by people who believed they understood her life better than she did. But instead of moving forward, she felt something inside her pull backward. Not fear, not hesitation, something clearer, something final. She looked toward the back of the hall where her parents sat under dimmer lighting. Slightly separated from the center of celebration, their posture quiet but dignified in a way that didn't require recognition to exist. Her mother kept smoothing her dress nervously, trying to make sense of the placement without asking the question out loud. Her father simply sat still, hands folded, observing everything without complaint, because that was how he had survived his entire life, by accepting what others imposed, even when it was unfair. And in that moment, Fonda understood something that shattered the last remaining illusion she had been holding on to. This was not just about seating. It was about worth. About how easily people like Garrett's family could redraw the invisible lines of dignity and decide who belonged where in the world, without ever needing to explain themselves. She turned slowly toward the stage. Garrett was now waiting, standing beneath floral arrangements that framed him like a symbol rather than a man. He looked confident, comfortable, even happy, as if nothing was wrong, as if everything was exactly as it should be. The officiant stepped forward, microphone adjusted, beginning the opening words of the ceremony. "We are gathered here today." But Fonda wasn't listening anymore. Her heartbeat was too loud, her thoughts too sharp. Every memory of the past 3 years began elapsing into a single point of clarity. Every dinner where subtle comments about standards had been made, every polite correction of her background disguised as curiosity, every moment she had dismissed discomfort because she wanted love to win over instinct. And now instinct was the only thing left standing. The officiant continued speaking, unaware of the shift happening inside her. If anyone objects to this union, that was all it took. Fonda stepped forward. At first, it was just a movement. From the side of the hall, a few guests noticed. Then more. The rhythm of the ceremony faltered. Her heels echoed against the polished floor as she walked toward the center aisle, past confused glances, past polite smiles turning uncertain. Garrett noticed her now. His expression shifted slightly, confusion first, then annoyance, as if she was breaking a carefully scheduled moment. "Fonda," he whispered sharply as she approached the stage, "what are you doing?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned toward the crowd. 200 guests. Influential families. Business partners. Friends of the Whitfields. People who had come to witness a perfect union. Her voice, when it finally came, was not loud. It didn't need to be. "Before this wedding continues," she said, "I need everyone to understand something that just happened in this room." A ripple of confusion moved through the audience. Evelyn Whitfield, Garrett's mother, stiffened instantly, sensing danger before it fully formed. Fonda continued, her voice steadying with every word. "My parents are in this hall today. They raised me. My father worked as a plumber. My mother worked in a cafeteria. They gave everything so I could stand here." She paused, letting the silence tighten. "And today, on my wedding day, they were moved." A murmur spread. Phones slowly lifted. "Not because there wasn't enough space," she continued, "but because someone decided they didn't belong with the important guests. The word important landed like a stone. Garrett stepped forward slightly, lowering his voice. Fonda, stop this. You're misunderstanding, but she turned to him now, and for the first time, there was no softness in her expression. Misunderstanding? She repeated quietly. You agreed to it. That sentence hit harder than anything else. The room shifted. Garrett hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. But it was enough. Evelyn Whitfield stood abruptly. This isn't appropriate, she began, but Fonda raised her hand slightly, not in aggression, but in control. And the room actually listened. That silence gave her everything she needed. I didn't come from your world, she said, turning back to the guests. But I thought love meant choosing someone who protects your dignity, not negotiates it. Her voice broke slightly, but she didn't stop. My parents are sitting at the back of this room right now like they don't matter. Like their lives, their work, their sacrifices are less important than a table assignment. She looked at Garrett again. And the man I was supposed to marry agreed to that. A heavy silence fell. No music, no movement, just hundreds of people absorbing a truth they didn't expect to hear on a day designed for celebration. Garrett's face tightened. You're humiliating my family, he said lowly. Fonda let out a breath that sounded almost like disbelief. No, she replied. You did that long before I spoke. Then she stepped back from him. One step, then another. And in those 2 steps, the entire structure of the wedding collapsed. Gasps spread as she reached into her hands and slowly removed the ring, placing it on the edge of the stage. I will not sign a marriage built on this, she said simply. It's over. The officiant froze. The orchestra stopped entirely. Evelyn Whitfield looked like she couldn't decide whether to intervene or deny reality. Garrett took a step toward her. Fonda, don't do this here, but she was already turning away. Not running. Not panicking. Walking. Calmly. Through the center aisle she had once imagined walking down in celebration, now walking out of it entirely. Behind her, chaos began to rise. Voices overlapped. Questions exploded. Chairs shifted. But she didn't look back. Not once. When she reached her parents, her mother was already standing, tears forming but unfallen, confusion and fear mixing in her expression. Sweetheart, what happened? She whispered. Fonda knelt slightly in front of them, taking her mother's hands. You didn't deserve what they did to you, she said softly. Her father looked at her, silent for a long moment, then simply nodded once. Not in approval, in understanding. Because he had spent his life recognizing moments when dignity mattered. More than comfort. Behind them, the Whitfield empire was beginning to crack in real time. Guests were whispering. Some were already leaving. Others were filming. Business partners exchanged uneasy looks, recalculating relationships in real time based on what they had just witnessed. Because in their world, perception was currency and what had just happened was irreversible. Evelyn Whitfield tried to regain control of the situation, but it was too late. The narrative had already escaped her hands. And Garrett stood frozen near the altar, realizing too slowly that the version of control he believed he had never actually existed. Outside the hall, Fonda stepped into the air that felt colder, sharper, real. She exhaled for the first time without pressure, sitting on her chest. The sound of the doors closing behind her echoed like the end of something far larger than a wedding. Her mother squeezed her hand. Did you mean it? She asked gently. Fonda looked ahead, toward nothing in particular, and nodded. Yes, she said. And behind them, inside the Whitfield estate, a reputation that had taken decades to build had already begun collapsing under the weight of a single truth spoken out loud.